Why hello there! It's been a while. I apologize if uploads have been scarce lately. Life has handed me some lemons and I'm still in the process of making juice, so please bear with me. And for those of you new to this channel, hi, my name is Matt and this is What in the World, the show where I'm presenting interesting world building related stuff that we can learn from. It's mostly stuff that I found online at the moment, but if you have a project to present or something for me to review, I'd be happy to do so. Just follow the instructions in the description. Today I got a city map for you, created by Daniel's Maps. That's danielsmaps.com if you want to check out his artwork. From a first impression, I can definitely recommend his world maps, they look amazing. And if you're an RPG enthusiast like me, you might be interested in his free battle maps, so please go have a look. Link in the description or go to danielsmaps.com. But today I want to focus on this city map, specifically this one, because in my opinion it gets a lot of things right. A lot of times when I see a city map online, it's a planned city with a nicely structured layout and a clean, proper wall around it. Now, I picked this map because it's the polar opposite. I don't mean to discredit the artist, and this map is not wrong or bad. In fact, a lot of new cities have been founded and pre-planned in very specific ways. Although this style of map is only realistic for newly founded cities. So instead of going for the perfect planned city, let's try and create a believable, immersive and naturally grown city. Real city maps are often rather messy, and for good reason. This map gets it absolutely right, and that's why I love it so much. That's what makes it look natural. Cities are not as static as we perceive them to be. They grow and change all the time, and most importantly, they won't stop growing just because someone puts up a wall. Yes, there are cities that were planned from the get-go and they will have a very orderly city center and nice straight roads and all that jazz. Some cities even stayed like this for a long time or couldn't even cover all the area they walled in. But normally they would only stay like this for a while. People will always want some piece of the cake and they will flock to the city over the years, looking for opportunity. People will settle nearby, even outside the walls, unless there's a good reason why they can't. The only scenarios I can think of off the top of my head where that would be the case are these. A. Authorities don't consider houses outside the walls part of their city, or those houses are simply not under their jurisdiction and therefore don't show up on the map. So, when creating a city map, it's worth thinking about whether this is an official map issued by the authorities, showing what legally belongs to the city, or whether you want an accurate representation of the surrounding area with all the little details, which, let's be honest, will most likely be the case. B. Authorities don't want anyone to settle outside the walls. In that case, you gotta ask yourself the question why, which might lead to some cool background story for your city, because normally the city will be happy about more people and especially more industry, because that means more money. Or C. Something physically prevents people from settling there. In this case, well, what is it? This would be a whole world building project on its own because it means introducing something extremely impactful to your world. For example, the outside world might be uninhabitable, maybe due to climate stuff, radiation, or a lack of ground. Or there might be some kind of danger lurking outside, like monsters, zombies, dinosaurs, dragons, or just constant war. In these cases, few people would want to settle in the outside world, and if they did, they would probably need some kind of protection. So already, this would have far-reaching consequences, like strong military presence, huge fortifications, or just new inventions, but in any case, new fancy jobs to keep these dangers in check. Anyone settling outside facing these dangers, and thereby putting their lives on the line, might be considered a higher-ranking member of society, like in feudal Japan, where peasants and craftsmen were in higher standing than traders because they actually provided something, and warriors were even above that because they were ready to die for their country. As you can see, trying to make a map like this work can be a pretty good world building exercise. But instead of creating a map and trying to make it work in retrospect, let's try and think of a narrative that supports our city building process and build a city that looks like it has naturally grown over the years. With a lot of farms providing food, nearby industry, maybe a castle or a monastery on a hill and other related buildings. The longer a city would have been around, the more smaller villages and suburbs could be forming nearby as people try and move to the city. And of course there could be industrial plants settling outside the city because they either need a lot of space or for some reason they can't go near other buildings. For example, tanning and charcoal burning are really stinky businesses that might not be very close to other buildings and not necessarily inside the city walls. And logging, fishing and mining and stuff like that obviously needs a certain location that might not be within the city walls. And in the end, it's always a question of budget, how big of a wall you can put up. Some cities didn't even have a wall at all, or just on one side, and there would be a naturally occurring barrier such as a river or a hillside on the other. Maybe the wall was built later, or it's still in the process of being built. So instead of doing this, give your city some life. Give it room to breathe. Sure, there can be one or two newly built and nicely planned out cities in your world, and maybe the odd one out where no one is allowed to build outside the walls for some reason. As well as the one that's terrorized by a dragon, where no one can safely live outside the walls, and so on and so forth. But there would be far more cities that would have developed naturally around industry, marketplaces, crossroads, transition points, military or religious buildings, etc., etc. We'll build a city together and in more detail at some point, but for now I want to show you how to do it by the example of this map, because it's actually really good. I go about it this way. First, I think about how my settlement started out, and what happened there that attracted a lot of people and made it become a big city. Most of the time, the reason is some kind of industry or trade that arose because of something that is in this exact location or in the surrounding area. For example, a town might form near a gold mine, which happened dozens of times in the USA. And if it's about anything other than a food source, how would these people sustain themselves? Unless we're talking about the modern world or the future, trade was often unreliable. On our city there's already ample food supply, which is great. So what happened here that made it become a big city? I think this one is all about the location and, most importantly, the river. Some rich boy might have been thinking to himself, this looks like a well-fortified place for a castle. And he was right, as the river provides a natural barrier on both sides and the castle is on a hill. But maybe in that case they would have built the city north of the castle so people wouldn't have to cross bridges all the time. So possibly the bridges, or a bridge, was there first. Maybe it was made a toll bridge because it's an important trade route coming from a neighboring country. There could have been a war at some point, so the bridge was secured by putting a castle there, which brought a lot of people and farms to feed the castle staff. Or probably, and there was a need for a port, for logistical reasons, which became very important, and so the city formed around that. The river splitting right at this point is actually another indicator for that. By the way, I'm working backwards here. Ideally, you'd want to have these thoughts before or while making the map. And if you're not working digitally, before putting pen to paper, of course. But even working backwards, there are so many possibilities, and that's what I like about this map. I don't have to make it work, it works for me. It inspires me to come up with world-building elements and story bits. And of course, you already have some points of interest that will help you get creative. By the way, you can even get several versions of this map for more input, like just the ruins of the city, or oh no, there's fire there. And then there are some more things you can glean from this river. First of all, this is two rivers flowing together, not one splitting. In fact, they almost never do. Rivers obviously always run downhill, and, well, sometimes they meet to form a bigger one. I think this one looks pretty neat and natural. Nicely done. And if you want to learn how to river like a pro, like my man Daniel over here, just type in how to river into YouTube and you'll find a very good and pretty scientific video by fellow world builder Artifexian. And by the way, I heard he's struggling with a bit of personal stuff at the moment too, so if you're a writer, if you're making maps, if you're into conlang, if you're interested in world building stuff for whatever reason, head on over and go watch his early tutorials. It will help him out and they are very good. I learned so much from them. And subscribe to his channel, of course. And while you're at it, subscribe to my channel as well. Oh, and hit the bell because I don't upload so much, so you want to get notified. And like the video, and leave a comment, and share it with your friends. Oh, and send me an email with stuff to review and... What was I talking about? Oh yeah, rivers. Settling near bodies of water was common practice for obvious reasons. Water is of course extremely important for humans, hope you're staying hydrated, and also provides you with food, since you can go fishing. Settling near a river specifically gives you even more advantages, like travel and trade by ship. As I mentioned earlier, on this map, if you're going upstream, you'll reach this point where the river splits and gets a lot narrower, so you might be forced to change to a smaller ship. Not only that, but there are also bridges, which means some people might have to change ships because they can't pass under them. And bridges mean more traffic on land, which in turn means even more reason for ships to come here, as it would be a rather convenient transition point. So this is one really important port. And what will tired travelers do when they change ships? Exactly, they stay the night, which means more business. All this would really help trade and industry in the city. so of course it grows big. And I like that there are multiple inns and taverns in the city, and honestly there could be even more. By the way, the river itself would also help your industry. For example, you could have a logging camp upstream and the lumberjacks could just float wood logs downstream. And why not send other goods downstream as well? Maybe big fruit or coconut, anything that floats and isn't immediately devoured by fish. And you can basically send anything downstream if you put it in a little ship or basket, which you can easily bring back up later. However, with all the traffic we established before, maybe there wouldn't be too much of that. Except for logging, because you can ride on these improvised rafts and steer them. Rivers also provide free energy, and humans have been using this energy for centuries. We have records of water wheel constructions from 200 BCE, and most likely they have been around for far longer than that, powering not only grist mills, but also sawmills, and in more recent history, paper mills, textile mills, hammer mills, and of course nowadays or in the future there could be turbines producing electricity. You could also have windmills for most of this, but the steady stream of a river is way more reliable. A quick side note on grist mills for your city planning. Flour producing mills of any kind often used to be a little away from other structures and fields because of the fire hazard. Flour dust is extremely flammable and people knew. So they took precautions because one building catching fire could easily lead to a whole block burning down. Fighting fires was not easy back then. Also, mills are noisy. Water and grinding sounds aside, there's a kind of clapping noise in the construction of grist mills, so you probably don't want it in the city center anyway. There's one more thing a river can do. If we're speaking of the real world and certain regions, once a year there will be an abundance of salmon basically jumping right on your plate. In a fantasy universe, there could be a similar event, or maybe a similar event with different creatures. Or just a creature that's always living in the river, kind of accidentally providing some service. For a real world example, the fine white sand on tropical beaches is produced by parrotfish biting and scraping algae off of rocks and dead corals, grinding up the inedible calcium carbonate reef material in their guts and then pooping it out as sand, which is then washed up on the shore. So thinking about the surrounding ecosystem, not only rivers but also the forest and whatever there is, will also help you build your city. So yeah, when making a city, pay attention to the surrounding area and what it could offer. Then build something that makes sense there and build your city around that. Don't just build a city, build a narrative. Thanks again to Daniel's Maps for providing me with these awesome maps to illustrate my points, links in the description. Go check out Artifexion for amazing world building tutorials, and if you're into gaming, have a look at my last videos on Elden Ring and Lost Ark. I'm really pleased with how they turned out, and even more bummed out that they got completely ignored by the algorithm. I hope I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching, have a wonderful time, Muffin out.